I think as an artist, we all have things that we can water. We just don't think that they're good enough to water, but we have them. And we just don't pay attention to them a lot of the time because we don't think that they live up, or we think they're too small, or they're not visible yet, or they won't actually grow. We don't actually believe that if we water them, it'll make a difference. And I think that is fundamentally untrue.
In this conversation, we get to talk to writer and director Elle Brooks-Tao. Elle opens up about the challenges she has faced throughout her journey in the industry, the high cost of pursuing an artistic life, the intricate balance between ambition and personal sacrifice, turning ADHD into a creative strength, and much more. Elle's vulnerability in discussing topics we don't often get to hear about is so needed and important. You'll walk away with many practical lessons and insights from this honest conversation with Elle Brooks-Tao. I'm just excited to chat with you. Thank you for doing this.
Chat with you too. Yeah. And I took Adderall today.
Oh,
so hopefully the rabbit holes will connect.
Yes. My wife says that she goes on a Kanye tangent because Have you heard Kanye talk?
Yes.
It's just like a stream of thoughts. And
I resonate.
Somehow start making sense.
Yeah.
And sometimes she does that and she's like, I think I'm going like a little Kanye because I'm like, what are you talking about now? Oh, okay.
A Kanye moment is always necessary at some point.
Yes.
Everything, Everywhere, All at Once. I was so excited when I read that Daniel has ADHD. And he's like, yeah, none of these things should have made sense. And then somehow when we started filming it, they did. And it was I feel like I saw that movie and it resonated so hard. It made perfect emotional sense to me, even if it didn't always make perfect linear sense.
Right.
But I started to realize, I've seen it a few times now with different people, and I started to realize that everyone who does not have ADD didn't really understand the movie at all.
Yeah. Well, I guess I haven't gotten that experience.
And everyone who does loves it.
Yeah, I loved it. I was like, this is, because it's funny because in my house, we pretty much all have it. I think my youngest probably doesn't have it as severe, but my oldest does. So we've actually had to do a lot of, he was not doing well in school. We pulled him out of school and we started doing this therapy. Now I forget what it's called. But it's helped him a ton because he just can't sit still. He couldn't concentrate. And it's been like amazing for him. It's just little exercises and coordination and like certain things that he just didn't learn as a baby. And then they cause that kind of fear response or triggers so he was like fearful of doing a lot of things. But it's been really cool because we've just been trying to study like more, especially my wife, how do we help him and then we're both like, okay, we definitely have that too. We're definitely not, we're definitely somewhere in the spectrum of ADHD and.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. We should just call this title of this talk just two ADD people having a conversation.
Yes, trying to.
We're understanding everything the other person is saying and no one listens.
Yeah, exactly. Except for like the people who have ADHD.
Yeah. I don't think I realized how what like a superpower something like ADD can be for art, and also what a hindrance it can be for the actual logistical process of making art.
Yes.
My EP at Sanctuary, Kristen, was one of the first people to be like, oh, I think you might have ADD. And then Winston was like, hey, would you mind reading this book about ADD? And then finally I was interviewing a doctor for I'm Not Crazy, I'm Sick for the documentary.
Yeah.
And he was a neuropathologist who would be intimately familiar with ADHD.
Yeah.
And I had been delaying asking anyone about it. So I was like, at the end of this 3-hour interview that we did, non-medicated.
Yeah.
I was like, hey, would you mind giving me the tests for ADHD real fast? And he took me into his office, gave me the test, and then I did it with Jason, the producer of the film. in the car ride to Maine. And the whole time I'm taking the test, I'm thinking, everyone feels this way. Like, do you get bored in meetings? Do you fiddle with things? Yeah. Do you? I'm like, yeah, everyone and their mom feels this way. This test is dumb. How is this a medical test? And so I took it. I scored 27 out of 30 on both tests.
Wow.
And then I had Jason, I asked him some questions and I was like, you feel this way, right? And he's like, no. And then I would read him another question. I was like, you feel this way, right? And he's like, no.
Yeah.
You feel, no.
Oh my gosh.
And I'm like, oh,
I know.
Okay. I only got diagnosed this year and I'm 36. So there's been a lot of naivety about how I work.
Yeah.
And probably how I affect other people.
Yeah.
And now that I'm putting some pieces together, which honestly was a complete surprise to me that I was like ADHD. Because I think when I was a kid, I didn't go to a traditional school. So in a way, it was helpful, but I also never really struggled in that way. And then, this is an example right now. But anyway, I directed for the first time. I started taking Adderall this year, and it significantly changed my life.
Wow.
And I tried directing with it for the first time last month. And the first day I realized I cannot direct on Adderall. I am way too focused in. I kept trying to think of direction and I would go, like it was just, my brain was not doing what it needed to do.
Yeah.
I felt like my direction was boring or not even concise, which is weird. So it was actually a really affirming moment because I thought, oh, this is actually how I am and how I'm wired is good.
Yeah.
And so I just didn't take Adderall for the next few days of shooting, which was great. So
yeah, that's cool. Yeah, because you kind of want to just be in your zone, like of you, like the essence of you, in those moments. So I guess it kind of changes your, how you think and how you react to things.
Yeah, and I think creativity is supposed to be a spider web, and it's okay to have like a grounding wire below the ground that's kind of shooting up ideas all the time, and you're just trying to organize them. So now I'm just like, okay, medication's great if I'm staring at a computer screen for 12 hours. It's not so great when I actually need to be artistic and creative.
Yeah, because that's when you're pulling from everywhere. And
we were made to be who we are for a reason. Yeah.
Have you read, I was thinking about this when you texted me about what we're talking today. Yeah. Have you read the War of Art?
No.
So it's a book by this guy, Stephen Pressfield, but the book basically is about he kind of presents this idea of the resistance, and it's everything that stands between us and then the artist that we're meant to be or the person that we're meant to be. So it can be internal forces, insecurities, and I'm gonna do it tomorrow. I'm gonna, do it next year, or maybe I won't do this. Maybe I'm not the right person. Like all of those, or external forces too, like things that just happen that get in the way. Like he says, okay, having a baby, for example, and you're like, well, I can't, I have to take care of the baby. I can't really do the thing. Yeah. And those are all, he calls it the resistance. So basically the book, it's kind of about how you overcome the resistance and like all the things that you have to overcome to become that person that you're supposed to be. So it's really interesting. But I was thinking about, that book came to mind when you mentioned the cost. I was like, okay, it's kind of like the same or similar concept of the cost that we have to pay, to really get to be, like everything that we're supposed to be, whether it's artistically or as people, which is connected, obviously. But there's so much cost that we have to pay. Like even realizing that self-awareness that has to come with, okay, maybe I do have some sort of hint of ADHD, and like there's a lot of struggles that come with that, and maybe insecurities. And I was just thinking through that, and maybe that's sort of a way to kind of talk a little bit about the cost, because I know you've in your career had to endure a lot of difficulties. And yeah, I think it would be really good to hear, your thoughts on, and we can go anywhere with that.
Yeah.
But there's a little kind of quote that about the resistance. It's an internal force that manifests through procrastination, fear, and self-doubt, attempting to keep individuals from achieving their creative potential. So how does the resistance manifest in your life?
The resistance, I just imagine like a cloud of little armies of, a lot of, do you know what? I would say the biggest resistance is this. It's like a cloud that's this lingering question of, do I want to do this anymore? Mm-hmm. That's the biggest resistance. Yeah. It's knowing that there's always a different lifestyle than being an artist that is out there. And I think there's lots of like actual physical, like you talked about internal, external.
Yeah.
And I think they're so different, right? And maybe we can talk about both of those things, because there's like the tangible financial cost, time cost, emotional cost, political cost, professional cost.
Right.
But the internal struggle is like, I think a lot of times because of all the external struggles mixed with like self-doubt or barriers that come up. So I think it's been funny. Every 2 years since I've been working in film, I think there's a moment where I really have to reconsider if I want to keep going.
Wow.
And that started when I was 20, because when I was 20, I got my first opportunity. And I just think this whole trying to be an artist thing has been so hard. And I think I've been lucky in a lot of ways. I think to people who don't sit down and talk with me or don't know me and they're just following whatever work they see come out or whatever relationship or whatever Instagram. Yeah. I don't have a huge following, but for people a lot of people who are listening to this probably, I don't think that there's been a whole lot of like public acknowledgement about what the cost has actually been over the last like 17 years that I've been working. So maybe we can hit some of that real stuff today.
Yeah. I mean, we don't really talk about that, and there's so much of that alternative universe life. Like, what if I was just, you were talking about everything everywhere all at once. And it's like these universes where maybe there's a person out there who has a job that is fulfilling and that you go home every day and you can just put it away. Like my brother-in-law, both of them, they work great jobs and they often get to clock out. And when we have like family parties, I'm like, what is it like to not be thinking about work right now or be, like just completely shut it out? And I wonder, like, maybe there's a version of Raul out there who's just like fulfilled in his career, chilling, clocking out and
clocking in and having a great life most of the time. So weekends off, planned vacation.
What would that be like? But it's hard when you think, no, but this is the life that I'm supposed to live. So I got to pay the price,
Let's see, last year, my friend Lauren Strom, who goes by Flurry, she's kind of part of this community that you and me are part of. And she's an amazing musician, amazing artist. And we went together to look for engagement rings for her when she thought she was close to getting engaged. And we walked into a shop who I know the owner. And so I was like looking around at all these pretty rings, and it was such a serene environment and everyone seemed so happy and everyone's just walking in to buy diamonds and they're in love. And I was like, this is kind of my ideal job. Just to like,
oh my gosh,
stand here and sell diamonds to like happy in love couples. What could be better? And I kind of half joked to the owner and one of the employees there that I'd love to like work with them.
Yeah.
And they're like, oh, if you're serious, you can come in tomorrow.
Oh, wow.
So I woke up at 8 a.m., put my work clothes on, which I haven't done since I was 16 probably, and went to work. and stood behind the counter and talked to
everyone. Are you serious? Yeah. This is amazing.
And they're like, "Oh, just see if you like it." And I loved it. It was so great. I was like so excited to go to work that day.
That's amazing.
And by the end of the day, there was like a loose job offer on the table for learning how to make jewelry and directing the operations and assisting. Wow. It was actually would have been one of my dream jobs to do, like designing jewelry. And it's still artistic, but a little bit more predictable.
Yeah.
And I did actually seriously consider it for 3 weeks, but it meant that I would have had to quit film.
Wow.
Like entirely.
That's crazy that you actually really went for it. Thought you were just going to say, "Oh, we went and told them and then I left." And
no,
you're like, no,
I was really, really tempted to make a transition. And I thought about it a lot. And I think at the time what it came down to was like, I'd lose my health insurance and there's certain like adulting reasons for like trying to continue in the career that I'm on. Come on, Elle, don't go squirrel on me now. Yeah. But I actually cried when I told her that I couldn't do it.
Wow.
I was like really sad. And I think it showed me that there was a longing for some sort of stability and predictability that was affecting my life that I didn't have.
Yeah. And it's I guess, it goes back to, dealing with the ADHD and being, I guess the part of you kind of longs for some sort of structure that you can just not, there's that piece I don't have to worry about, because everything else just doesn't have structure. It's like unpredictable. And you kind of wish there was something in your life that is kind of just like filed away as that's what it is, and I don't have to worry about it.
Yeah, exactly.
Because I'm hearing you say that, and I'm like, it's true. Like it feels exciting sometimes because when you think about quitting or you think about I can't do this anymore, then you start thinking like, maybe I should just get a job where I don't have to do this thing anymore. And my wife and I have been talking about, because it's been a really hard year, and there have been a lot of moments when it's like, okay, God, what are you doing? Like, this is too much. Maybe we misheard you, or maybe we are totally off. At some point we got off the plan and we're just on our own. And maybe this is why it's so hard. Because it's true. Like what you're saying, like all the different costs that come associated with it, the, relationship cost and financial cost. But how do you, I guess, bring yourself back to going, no, I actually really love this and I have to do this?
Yeah. I think at the end of the day, I haven't lost my belief that art can actually add beauty to the world. And I know that sounds so cheesy, but like at the end of the day, I feel like we need art. And I feel like we need art because it feels like every day the world is getting harder and we hear more and more depressing things. And when wars happen, when things like COVID happen, when everything that we've lived through the last few years and will live through in the next 3 years goes down, I think people turn to song, and they turn to poetry, and they turn to reading books, and they turn to something that awakens a piece of them that can pursue joy or pursue something that sits with them in their misery, which is art. And so I think art has the ability to meet people where they're at. And that's why so many different tonalities and personalities and messages work for that reason. And I just think I still believe in that so much that I don't want to leave it behind yet. Unless there is in pursuit of a greater cause. And I'm not sure what that would be right now. But like at the end of the day, I think the cost of being an artist is different for everyone, but there is always a cost.
Yeah.
And it's usually like very great,
Mm-hmm.
whether it's financial, personal, professional. And I'd even say that it almost goes in those three tiers. Like when I was younger and in my 20s and just getting going, I would say the cost was like hugely financial.
Yeah.
And I think anyone who's trying to build a career and get off the ground, it takes a very, very, very long time.
Yeah.
And there's no like predictable trend for how long it's going to take for anyone.
Mm-hmm.
Like Ki Huai Kwan, right? He just won an Oscar after 20 something years of leaving the industry.
Right. Yeah.
He is an ultimate artist. He's one of the best actors I've ever seen. And he has suffered from external circumstances and probably internal that have delayed his ability to be an artist. And I think when we look at those very real examples, but for me personally, when I moved to New York, I was 26 and I had just married Tyler, who has still of anyone on earth probably still has like my deepest respect now. And that was so hard watching him and John get Variable going and like hard helping to some degree.
Yeah.
Anyone who worked with that company knew how hard it was. And I think John has talked about this a little bit, but it looked like a really sexy, cool company on the outside.
Yeah.
But on the inside, it's just a bunch of kids who don't really know what they're doing and are trying to act confident and cool and making every mistake possible along the way. And I think the cost financially, like the reality is that a lot of people weren't taking paychecks in different seasons and struggling to live in New York City. And a big reason that I started directing was to try to make sure that Tyler and I had some sort of bed of security in case the company went under.
Wow.
And there is a lot of fear and there is a lot of, worrying about bankruptcy at different seasons. And it was like a super high, followed by an unpredictable super low, followed by another high. And that's nothing that is ever going to be spouted out on social media.
Right.
But that was the reality. And there is so much fear we didn't have a lot of money to begin with. When you're 25, 26, you have nothing almost, and you're trying to live in New York. We were going into the negatives every month on our personal budget. And sometimes I look back and I'm not even sure how any of us were keeping up. But like, that is the reality of how directing started for me.
Wow.
Was trying to pursue security. And I loved directing and I loved art. And I think I wanted to be a director, but that was never like my life goal.
Yeah.
And it pushed me to pursue it, I guess.
Yeah, because on the outside, as one of the many people who started, it kind of came up in the Vimeo world and the DSLR revolution, whatever. Variable was the company for a while where we were all like, oh my gosh, like look at these guys and the work that they're putting out and they're all incredible. So it's crazy, to hear the other side of the story.
And on the inside, every single person there is suffering from complete burnout and in therapy and financially, struggling. I just want to rip down the impression of that.
But it's so hard in the social media world and keeping up with the image of, especially I guess from some, like probably from a business standpoint too, it's not good business to be vulnerable and be like, I'm going through something, it's not. And I think that's why a lot of filmmakers too are not vulnerable, as it's like the artistry probably wants you to be, because artists want to often put their feelings out or share or be like, there's other people who are going through this, but then that's the professional side that you're like, well, I can't look like I don't have my stuff together. I can't look like, because if someone sees it, they might go, oh, well, we shouldn't work with that person. And like that, yeah, like thinking about that season for you, I'm sure that was probably a lot of we got to keep an external image, and an external perception,
Yeah. I know it actually makes me emotional thinking back to it, because it's like, you're seeing a company look really cool on the outside, and you're seeing some of your best friends growing, and the potential to become successful seems like it's at your fingertips.
Mm-hmm.
But then watching people's health just rapidly deteriorate, like that's the cost sometimes of pursuing things too hard, or trying to be too cool, or get too big when it's maybe not the time.
Yeah.
And I saw too many people from age like 28 to 31 whose health just completely fell apart, myself included.
Yeah.
I mean, by the time I was like 31, 32, I was having a really tough time. And everyone at Sanctuary took really good care of me, luckily, but it was hard. And I think I'm just being real about it, because I just think that is a reality at some point for every artist.
Right. Yeah. And was there a point in your journey where you had to go, okay, I have to figure out that I need to take care of myself, that I need to focus inwardly, that I need to grow as a person, and the outcome, the work will be the outcome of that.
Yeah.
But because we typically put that first, I'm going to do great work and I'll take care of myself when I have time.
Yeah.
But it should be the opposite, and the work, it'll be a result of how you're growing personally.
Yeah. I think there was a definite point. I mean, it probably happened when COVID happened, that the night before COVID was announced in New York City, I still remember the date. I think it was March 14th or 15th, something, 13, 14, 15, because I had a shoot 2 days before. And then I remember that I was, I think, a pretty unhealthy person at that time. And healthy, and I would say like physically I was really unwell. Like I was the lowest weight I've ever been. Not for lack of eating, just by stress. And like I was, I think, doing pretty well professionally, but I was taking so much on and pursuing so many projects at once to try to like achieve things before I was 35. I want to make a feature. Maybe I want to make 2 features, and I want to keep my commercial career going, and I need to keep my finances up, and I need to be saving for retirement. I need to be doing everything at once. And, in the meantime, like my marriage wasn't doing well, and I physically wasn't doing well, and I emotionally was not able to meet people where they needed me to be. And I think that I remember just crying my eyes out, because I added up the projects that I had committed to and the hours in the day, and I realized that there is no human way that I could put time into all of these things that I signed up for. I actually broke it down by hours per day.
Wow.
And the only way for the next 6 to 10 months that I would be able to complete things that I had committed to was if I slept for 3 hours a night. And I just remember crying, because I was like, I'm going to have to pull out of some things, but I don't know what to pull out of, and I don't even know if I can.
Wow.
Because I've signed contracts or made commitments. And then the next day, literally, I think it was like 2 a.m. that night, like into the morning, I saw that COVID had been announced. And even though that's a really terrible thing, what happened was that suddenly my schedule is clear. of nothing, and everything's being pushed and delayed. And I took 3 months of intentionally for hours a day, just taking a really hard look at myself and look at life. And I think I probably became my healthiest self to some degree. Yeah. Maybe that's not true. You don't become healthy in 3 months, but I became clearly on the road to becoming healthier. And I've not allowed that journey to stop for the last 3 years. And that's the difference, I guess, is intentionality.
Yeah. Because I remember that year, kind of towards the end of the year, I was just home a lot. And I remember my wife and I were just like, oh my gosh, like, this has been amazing. Like, we had never really had, because she was home and I was home and we had our 2 boys, and we were like, we love this. We love just being home. We had never had a chance to just be the 4 of us. We had no friends coming over. You know,
you had like fulfilling, focused time.
It was crazy. And it really helped us too with a lot of the things like you're talking about, where we started looking at our lives and going, okay, there's certain things that need to get better. There's certain habits that we've developed that are not sustainable, you know, that are not healthy for our family, are not healthy personally. So it really helped us look at ourselves and at our family and go, okay, if we want to do this. I mean, my wife ended up that year quitting her job because she was like, we both quit our jobs, and it was like, okay, we're gonna face insecurity on this side, but we're gonna go towards some health.
Yeah.
Because it was, I think the pitfall of hungry filmmakers and hungry younger filmmakers or artists is that, you just think I'm going to kill myself for 10 years and then I'll take care of myself.
Oh yeah. And to a degree, it's kind of true.
Right.
That you might need to do that.
Right. Yeah.
And that's the choice of, right. And maybe when you're younger, you're also not, you definitely don't have the money to invest in like good food or a gym, you know, if you're trying to like put all of your money into your films. Like every couple $100 is every $50, you know.
Yeah.
It's massive.
It's bills and it's
and so even having the mindset of priorities is just not quite there yet. And I think it sounds like that's what, you know, as you get older, like that's what you guys were deciding to choose and then receiving the payoff for.
Yeah. But I just wish sometimes that I had someone come into my life when I was early on, you know, and said, hey, I know you can't afford it. I know you don't have the time, you know, you never have the time, but at least someone had put those things in front of me and gone, okay, but you really have to, here's just a couple things that you should consider, you know, keep them at the front.
Yeah.
And because back in those days, I had no idea. So there was no idea to even try to prioritize it. Prioritize health, prioritize relationships, prioritize, you know, so many things that suffered. You just eventually kind of grow up into realizing it, or maybe you don't. You just keep going.
Yeah.
But I wish that someone had said that to me and earlier, you know, and it has come now later on through that journey of self-discovery and trying to, you know, develop myself and all of that. And obviously it's a never ending journey, but you kind of wish, and even this type of conversation is refreshing, because hearing people like you who are, like you said it earlier, like you're putting out amazing work and you're doing all these great things, and, you know, your career is continues to grow, but then hearing, okay, there's people who are on a trajectory, but they're also, you know, struggling and also paying the cost, you know? So it's encouraging, it's refreshing, and it's also something that I wish we could talk about more.
Yeah, I think if you asked me now, like, would you be okay with being less successful and having a thriving personal life and a thriving marriage and thriving inner peace, cheesy as it sounds, I'd be like, heck yeah, I'm good.
Yeah.
Like, let me be a healthy person for other people to work with. Yeah. How much do we really need?
Yeah.
That being said, there's definitely a point of being an artist where, like, yeah, I do need enough to live. Right. I do need consistency.
Yeah.
But I think there's different problems with different things, and like my first few years of my career were really good for me. Not a lot of women were directing, and I think it's fair to say that helped me out starting in that time. And at the same time, I think I was home for about a week a month for 2 years.
Wow.
And that's a choice. Like, did I have to do that? No one's forcing me to do that. But when you get work, you are so, especially in that season for me, there had been so many years of, bank accounts that were deserts, tundras, that you just want to like scroll away because you think it's going to go away any day. And there's a fear, it's like a massive fear.
Yeah.
And I don't think I think that's healthy. I think that has not left me yet. So, yeah.
And saying no to things, it's like, no, I'm not going to say no. Yeah. I can't say no because the phone might stop ringing tomorrow. So I got to say yes and hope for the best.
Yeah.
But because another thing that is a sort of a byproduct of saying yes to work is that then you don't have time to not only take care of yourself, but you don't have time to even develop the things that you want to work on.
Yeah, 100%.
Like your projects.
Yep. I'm always questioning that.
Yeah.
Like, should I be taking more time to develop my projects right now, or I won't actually be successful, or I won't actually be able to show everyone that I'm a real artist. Yeah. That's a huge back and forth in my head every day.
Mm-hmm.
So,
yeah.
But the reality is that, like, if you're trying to make money from your art, you have a responsibility to your job.
Yeah.
And so it's like kind of a choice of then between life and your side hustle, which is like your personal art.
Mm-hmm.
And I really admire people who are able to say, I'd rather give most of my time to that.
Yeah.
I don't know if I'm that way, but I admire it. And I think in my life, the people that I know, a lot of the people who I'd say, wow, I'm so inspired by their creativity, are not the most successful on paper,
Yeah.
But they're just truly pouring into it.
Yeah.
And I think that's really important to note, because I'm part of a writing class right now that I'm taking. And it's a book writing class that I kind of started as like a hobby, something interesting that's not film.
Yeah.
And everyone in the class does not work in film. One woman works at a car dealership. One woman is a mom of 4 boys, all under 6.
Wow.
One woman, her husband had a brain tumor for a very long time that went undiagnosed, and she's a night nurse. And she took care of her kids and worked overnight shifts and took care of her husband as the breadwinner in the family, with a job that pays okay. It's probably not, like great. You're making millions.
Right.
And they are all managing to write books right now. And they are normal people who never went to school for writing, have no on-paper expertise. And I have read chapters of what they've written, and it's brought me to tears.
Wow.
Like, it's beautiful. It is art. And I look at my lifestyle. I don't have kids yet. I am able to work in art, right, in film.
Yeah.
And I feel like I struggle to write mine. And I look at their lives and I'm like, oh my gosh, you have so many responsibilities. They're not complaining. And so sometimes there's something being said for getting out of our bubble.
Yeah.
And focusing in on the one piece that we want to make. So yeah, that's been making me think a lot.
Yeah. And when your art is also your job, it unfortunately is going to infiltrate your desire for a certain outcome, because you're used to delivering a product. You're used to getting hired to deliver a product that has to be great and has to do. Now you're trying to follow a very similar process to do your art.
Yeah.
Whereas these women, like, no, I'm doing my job, I'm taking care of my family, and I'm doing my art. So it's nice to have that separation, I'm sure, not diminishing what they're going through, but that's hard too, to just not have a lot of separation between the two, because you have to, and also just the industry, we just put, because of social media and because of all of this validation things that are out there. Yeah, it's really hard to separate the two. Like, you're, not put pressure on a certain outcome. Okay, I'm going to make my piece and it has to be this and that, and it has to win an award, or it has to be whatever, and what are my peers going to say? And we don't put the focus on the process, which that's probably the most valuable thing.
Yeah. And I think that there's this really huge misconception that a lot of us put on ourselves, that to be successful as an artist, you need to be, what's the sophisticated term? You need to be commercially successful. And I fundamentally disagree with that. I just feel like everyone's an artist, and everyone has the ability to make art. And a lot of the people whose art we love, or poetry we love, or music we love, weren't successful when they were alive. Like, you take Basquiat, it's like classic, right? It's probably the first thing that came to your mind. Yeah. It's,
they're all dead.
They're all dead. So yay for artistry. But you'll be great when you die. Yeah. You won't even be around to enjoy it or reap the rewards.
This is your
grandchildren, great grandchildren can do it. And then other artists can make movies about you. Right? That's the goal. But I truly, something that makes me less scared when it comes to work is that we put on ourselves that we need to be making money making our art. But at the end of the day, if we're not, I think the correction, the healthy truth would be, we need to be putting ourselves around stories that we can make art about. And if we're doing that, then we are successfully pursuing art. Because when you look at feature filmmakers, right? And you take yourself a little bit out of the commercial world, music video world, and the short film world, and you start to look at, like, what do you make movies about? Yeah. There's a massive amount of research and ideas and everything that are driven, that are not, I would say, the majority of based in LA or New York or the cool filmmaking areas, wherever those are. They're based around people whose stories we don't have access to, so that we can see a world that we don't know. Yeah. And so I think that's why I find the books so fascinating, of what the people in my writing class are writing about. Because these are not people that I would ever in a million years speak to or connect with weekly, unless it was through art that we're all making. And like, I feel like even if you go work at a sunglass shop or a coffee parlor and you're making minimum wage, but you're meeting so many fascinating characters, or you're doing a delivery service, or you're taking Craigslist gigs, or whatever it is, you are building stories that you can write about based on an experience that you'll never be able to experience again. Yeah. And I think that's really beautiful. And I would call that success personally.
I love that. I love that because, it's the most important thing in being an artist is to just, you have to live life. and experience life and experience
the realities,
heartbreak and experience struggle and experience pain, because that's what ultimately informs the stories that you want to tell or the artifacts that you want to create. You know, it has to be it's a channeling of all of those things.
Yeah.
You know, and if you don't experience life, or if you're not present for life as the moments come by, then you're not going to have that reservoir of things inside of you that then you can put out. You know,
I think I've started to find that when I compliment people to someone else or to them, I find that I compliment people when I feel that they've lived a lot of life, because I admire that.
Yeah.
Not because they're so successful as a filmmaker or, you know, I'll be like, actually, when I was talking about you and doing this, I described you as, man, from the conversations Raul and I have had in the past and on the road, you know, that dude has lived a lot of life. And that, for me, that's like what makes me respect people, is when I know that they've been through so much and they've weathered so much.
Yeah.
And I was always say, Raul has the kindest heart. Like
thank you.
It's true, because you have empathy, because you've been through a lot. Like when you were telling me about your health things that you've pushed through. If you've not been through that, you don't know how hard that is to understand what that's like.
Yeah.
And still having the courage to pursue a career that you love and make art. It's so hard, and it deserves recognition and respect. And that's what you're going to write about as time goes on and make things out of. And that's why you can understand people and ask questions and like, and I have such respect. So there's people that I meet that I'm just like, yeah, you haven't really lived a lot of life. Yeah. I'm just like, I don't really have time for you, bro. Yeah. You know,
it's true. I mean, thank you. I really, that means a lot. Because it's true. And, you know, sometimes my wife and I jokingly will say like, okay, why have we had to go through so much, both separately and together in life, you know, and we haven't had it easy, but we're grateful. And you eventually learn how to look at things in retrospect and go, okay, I see it. Okay, it was worth it.
A long time down the road.
Oh, yeah. Okay, I see why that happened. Yeah. But it's true. I was thinking of two of our best friends in Virginia. They both grew up in the town basically that we live in. They didn't really go away for college. They kind of worked there, and this opportunity had come up for them to move to California, to San Diego, and they were trying to debate whether they should go or not. And obviously, selfishly, as their best friends, we were like, "Oh, you guys should stay."
No, definitely stay. Yeah.
But we also brought that up, like, you guys just need to go live life, get out there. Like, their parents are in town, families are in town, siblings, very local family nucleus, and their whole life has been in this town. And we were like, you need to go and live, like, just the two of you, get away from everyone. You know, hopefully you'll get to just enjoy a beautiful town for 2 years there, because it's like a 2-year thing that they're doing. Yeah. And you just need to see the world and experience life and see, you know, and it's been hard. Like, they've been there now like 8 months or something, and they're struggling to find friends, and it's been hard. But at the same time, it's like you can see how just living life, seeing other things. Like, I tell friends too who are not married and don't have kids, and maybe they're making a little bit of money. It's like, one of the things that I wish I could have done in my life is travel more. You know, and I grew up in a different country, and I got to see a lot, but I still wish that I could have seen other countries and been one of those weird people who would just go for a month somewhere. And because if you don't experience things in your life on a personal level, or you're not exposed to things that other people go through, then you have a very small worldview. You have a very small,
a hard time being empathetic to people, and being empathetic is part of building characters. Like,
yeah. Like, if you haven't lived through things, hard things, then it's hard to.
How do you write a character who goes through hard things?
Yeah.
When that's literally the basis of storytelling. It's overcoming, conquering, hero's journey. You know, fail. What worst fear realized? What's that like?
I think so. I think so. I'm not.
We love to glorify it and tell stories about it. We're so afraid to live it.
I saw this. We were talking about Rick Rubin earlier, and
we got to bring him up. And
we got to bring him up.
We got to bring him up.
But he had a quote about abundance mindset, and it was like, in the abundant mindset, the river never runs dry. Ideas are always coming through, and an artist is free to release them with the faith that more will arrive. And I think when you kind of stay in that smaller mindset, really, you think that because you can't afford to take a break, or you can't afford to take a day off, or you can't afford, I have to work because the ideas are there. And when I thought about that, as we were talking, it's like, no, sometimes that's what creating that abundance mindset is, like living life, experiencing life, looking at things from a lens of just detaching from the work. And that's when sometimes more ideas come. Read a book that you wouldn't have read, that it doesn't apply. It's not a filmmaking book. Because I remember doing that. Everything was about film, and everything was like cinematography, and every YouTube video I'm going to watch is going to be about lighting or whatever, even though there's not a lot of great ones out there. But how do you cultivate that? Like, how do you cultivate that, I guess, desire to be open to life?
I was reading about writer's block the other day, and I'm looping this back to what you were just saying, because they were saying that writer's block really stems from insecurity. Even if you're just like, well, I'm in a flow, and every 5 days or 10 days or whatever, I'll hit writer's block, and it's this wall. But they're like, but that doesn't just happen for no reason. It's not because your brain's tired. Something in you is fearful of writing something good enough. Something in you is fearful of not being good enough, not having the tools to be good enough. And then you go into, let's say, all of our childhood trauma, right? Or whatever it is. Internal, external, philosophical forces at play all at once. But then they were saying that one of the best ways to overcome writer's block is something called delayed procrastination. And where you allow yourself to procrastinate and you structure your procrastination. And when I loop that back to, like, sometimes we're afraid to just step back, believe that the ideas will come and they don't need to come that minute or that day or that month, but we are a wealth of, we're a geyser of ideas that we just need to tap a little deeper maybe. I feel like delayed procrastination has become a really intentional thing in my life and in my work. Like, I'm going to be okay with taking 2 days off to hang out with my husband, or I'm going to be okay with taking some time away from paid work to focus really intentionally on this project, or I'm going to be okay with taking time away from this project to focus really intentionally on work. And like, procrastination is a really healthy thing, I think, as an artist, even if it's like taking a huge step back or stepping away from a job, if you want to think of it in micro procrastination, or like a bigger world of procrastination, whatever that is,
it's technically procrastination, but technically you're just allowing yourself to take a break and to go do other things that are also important.
Like you're allowing a piece of your brain to rest, that your subconscious can come to the surface without stress. I think that's what it taps into. Like, you're letting the ideas come when you don't expect them to come. You're not forcing them. You're trying to get through that stress point, block point.
And sometimes and I don't know if that happens to you, but sometimes your best ideas come in the moments where you're not trying to find them, and you're just doing something, menial, or you're just doing busy other things like housework, or, you're out for a walk, or you're hanging, doing things that are totally unrelated.
Yeah.
And then, something, I got like, my wife makes fun of me because I have come to love, I used to hate it, but I have come to love cutting the grass. And I love getting on the lawnmower and spending 3 hours. Sometimes Amanda's like, why do you take so long? And
like, I'm having my best ideas
I'm
right
literally,
now.
I'll put a podcast on, or I listen to a book. And sometimes I'm like, I stop and I'm like typing on my phone because I get something, or I'm like, I gotta text somebody something that and because literally I have to do this thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm just driving my lawnmower,
Yes.
and but it has become like a thing that I'm like, every week now I look forward to. Like on Sundays, I'm going to try to cut the grass. Yeah. We don't have beautiful grass yet, but one day. But yeah, like I think that building those practices is really important.
Yeah.
Whether it's like you're going to schedule a time every day where you go and do something, or you're just going to allow, like you said, I'm going to allow myself to take 2 days off.
Yeah. I think like letting your senses rest is so important, like mowing the grass.
Yeah.
I take long walks with my headphones on so that I can just blare music.
Yeah.
And generally that gets me into this world. Whenever I'm in a city, I do it, and I always have to give myself longer than I need to get to a place, because it's inevitable that at least 3 times when I'm walking, I'll stop and I'll like sit down on some random person's stoop, or duck under the overhang of a building and get my notes app out and just start like writing a scene or writing an idea. Or I'll just be like randomly emotional, and I'll just be like, I'm like all teary, for some reason, because this thought that needed to come out is finally coming out in public in front of everyone. And, so usually when I need 20 minutes, I'll give myself an hour to walk somewhere.
Yeah.
But that's what you have to do.
Yeah. And it's important to, I tell people who are built like our generation's built, and we're just have to feel like we just have to nonstop go after the dream, after the goal.
Yeah.
But this is just as important, if not more important, to build these practices into ultimately your creative process.
When do you think you do your most successful, like, thinking, whether it's writing or concepting or ideation? Like for you, what's that?
I'm trying to develop more structured practices. I'm not a very structured person. When my time, when I'm not on a meeting or on a phone call, it's like work, but I don't often go like, okay, this hour I'm going to work on this thing. This hour I'm going to, and I think it's like a good and bad thing, but I'm trying to give a shot to structuring things more.
Yeah.
And I've done a couple sessions, call it, of like, I'm going to try to schedule some kind of deep work time. Mm-hmm. And I'm not sure yet if I love it or if it's just, but I want to try it. But one day in one of those kind of scheduled deep work times where I'm like, I'm not going to take a meeting for 3 hours. I'm going to try to not look at my phone as much, and then I had one session where I was like, man, this is great. And I had another one where I was like, this is terrible. I need to jump on another thing and like do all these other things. So I think I'm trying to develop better practices, but often it really is random times where I'll just throw something on my notes app and that I know I can go back to and reference and pull back up the idea, or I'll record a voice memo.
Yeah.
I'm like, I think and just like, here's the idea that came to mind.
That's what Rick Rubin says to do.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. It's true. He's
success. Anything Rick Rubin says, you might as well just
please go follow that man. Yeah. I don't know. What about you?
I think, I think music brings it out of me. I think the best ideas and the best scenes that I've written are written by some one sentence in a song that sparks a scene idea, you know. I was sitting at a coffee shop doing some writing, not script writing, just kind of boring writing yesterday. And I was listening to this Zach Bryan song, his latest album. I'm not a fan of country, but I have been listening to it more as inspiration for this thing that I might be doing. And the Zach Bryan song came on, and it was so raw. And there was a line in there that just sparked this idea for like the best fight scene ever between a husband and wife. And I just started writing it. I got just lost in it.
Yeah.
And that's not what I should have been working on. But I knew I was going to lose it if I didn't write it down right then. Yeah. So yeah, I think generally music, but I'd also say structured time. Just the older we get, you know, you just appreciate structure more. Yeah. And like, I've started to set timers, and every 25 minutes you take the
Pomodoro technique or whatever
technique, like the tomato. So that's been helpful, because there is a part of me that's like, art versus commerce. Okay, if you're not following through with something, is it worth spending time on? Sometimes the answer is yes, and sometimes the answer is a hard no.
Yeah, you know? Yeah, that's cool. Yeah, it does. I'm trying to get better at it. I'm trying to see what it leads to, this scheduling time. And because in the book that I mentioned at the beginning, The War of Art, there's a section about, he calls it turning pro. And he talks about, like, there's a moment when if you're a professional, you have to show up. You have to go to work. Yeah. And there's a quote, I can't remember if it's his or someone else's in the book, but it's like, oh yeah, the muse always meets me, like it always strikes at the right time, and it's like, it just happens to be at 9 a.m. every day when I sit down to work. And it's like a joke to be like, no, sometimes you just have to do the work, you know. So I think that part I'm trying to get a little bit better at, doing the work, you know, or not thinking, because it's that balance, right, of creative and loose, and follow intuitions and follow your rabbit holes, and then the other part of like, I gotta do certain things. And obviously the job, when you're working on a job, on a project, then that's easier. When you're not, and you're just trying to move other things forward, that becomes harder to, you know, what fire am I trying to put out, or what idea am I chasing?
Yeah. And that's like kind of thinking back to the cost when you're thinking about what to pursue and what you're paying for it. Emotional time out of your day, ideation, like that. That's been a big weight lately, more especially just something that I've been thinking about, because sometimes I think it can be encouraging, like, would I make this film if I don't get anything back from it? Would I make the film even if it flopped? You know, would I write just to get the experience and become a better writer even if no one thinks that it's good? You know, and I think those are like the questions as artists that we're always battling.
Yeah, and you can't, dang it, freaking Rick Rubin came back. Because there's he talks in a video, it just came to mind, where he's like, hey, you can't control the outcome. Like you think that what he says is along the lines of, you do the work, you finish it, you put it out, and he says that you just do it as an offering to God. And you just put the work out. And he's like, you can't control It might resonate, it might not, it might be perceived as good or perceived as bad. But if it's something that is a story that you felt like you needed to tell, or something that you felt like you needed to create, then the moment it's delivered, it's a success.
Yeah.
Because you completed it.
Yeah. There are very few things that I've made that I've not put out, actually. And that's not like a jab to people who don't put things out that they don't want to. Yeah. But I've always felt like I might never be good enough. So I might as well put this out because there's a conversation around it. And I'm cool because I know it's not the last thing I'm going to do.
Yeah.
And I think that there's always a strategy. I mean, some things, there's a strategy to something you might not want to be seen. But I don't know. I've always come under the mentality of there's a lot of stories behind any project that we make.
Yeah.
And to me, those stories and the people that made it with me, the lessons learned, the mistakes learned, the failures, and all the things that I'm not proud of, those are more powerful than a good result.
Yeah.
Actually, to me personally, that's just a huge grounding belief that I have. And I think sometimes I wish that I could, like, on the surface, just be making, you know, always be choosing to not put stuff out, and then boom, you make this great thing and everyone just thinks you're an overnight success and you're a genius. And all the art you make is great, you know, but that's just not reality. It's not real life. It's not the real life of an artist. And there's been some things that I definitely didn't want to be seen, that I don't know if they're a full reflection of what I can do or even my taste, to be honest. But the more people that I talk to that have been around for 30, 40 years making things, they still feel that way about projects that come out. And so, I think that there's a huge power to owning the learned lessons. Because the hope is that you get in a room anyway and you're able to have a conversation about it. And actually, so far, the things that have really gone wrong that I don't feel like maybe reflect my taste or my vision, they ended up not in the same spot that I wish that they would have. It's the people that I have been able, the people who would give me opportunities for future work, I've been able to always to have a discussion. And there's been, I think, a respect earned about me just owning, I mean, things were learned. Yeah. Now I know. Here's the other work that backs up, you know, like what I'm capable of. It's so,
The process is the goal.
Yeah. There we go. That's your sticky sentence.
There you go. Oh, there you go.
Is the goal. Yes. The process is the goal. Yeah.
It's almost like you have to deconstruct the thought of what the goal is. You know, if it's not the outcome, then the process, because that's where all the good stuff happens and the bad stuff, but all the lessons, and you know, you can't really. So, because especially in personal work, the outcome is okay. If it's a short film, maybe it'll get into festivals, and I mean, what do festivals even matter anymore?
I know.
You know, or
I roll.
You hope that it gets you more work in that vein, you know, but again, you can't control that. Like it might, and that's great, but it might not.
Yeah, we're making art to get better at making art. And some things will get dredged up from the archives from early on that are still the best things that we've ever made because they're the most raw.
Yeah.
I read something that for book authors, a lot of times the first book is one of the most successful because their voice is so raw that there's not a filter around the vulnerability. And one of my reasons to put something out lately that I was unsure about was because this might come across really wrong here as egotistical. I was rereading an interview from little baby Elle.
No.
Like the first one that I ever did with Music Bed. I think the first time anyone ever called me a director. And I think I was like 27, maybe. And I was just so excited to be like talking.
Yeah.
And I like, I don't understand why everyone's so afraid to talk about how hard this is. You know, I'll never take my name off anything. Like there's just such a lack of fear mixed with naivety, mixed with passion that you have when you're just getting going, that does kind of become like adulterated over time. And, or maybe that's not the right word, watered down, you know, we'll go back to 5th grade grammar. That like, I was like, wow, I really like that voice, this young girl who didn't know any better.
Just,
you know,
just going
I'm just going to go with that. I'm going to like honor that. Yeah.
Yeah. It's the fearlessness, you know, that you want to keep from that.
Yeah.
Because then you probably are like so many other things. You're like, no, I learned so much in the process. I sent you something last night that I saw online,
really nice.
And then I found another quote by that same person that I thought was very fitting with what we've been talking about. But the quote is, sometimes when you're in a dark place, you think you have been buried, but you actually have been planted. And it's from Christine Kane. And thinking about the cost, you know, and everything that we're talking about, it's true. When you're in the middle of like the shittiest times, you just like, it's over.
Yeah.
But how much of that is just, you know, you can't rush a seed. You know, you can't yell at it to tell it to grow faster. You just have to wait, you know.
Yeah.
And that's really hard.
Trust and water it.
Yeah. And I think that's a lot of what we're talking about is that watering.
It's funny, not to get all existential on you, but I love that quote. I mean, yeah, it makes me emotional to think about, because there have been a lot of dark times the last decade. And I think for everyone, you know, so I'm not alone there. But those are the times that you do not feel like watering the seed. Like those are the times where you're like, I'm just going to stay in my dark hole for a little while. And I think those are the times that it most needs watering. And it's always where life is going to spring from. But we never feel that way in the moment. And as a kid, I think, I don't know, my mom was in a bunch of car accidents. There's a lot of things in my childhood that were very chaotic for our family. And when I was really little, I always remember being like, God, I just pray that this is like the worst thing I can ever think of happening. So I just pray that you'll make it the best thing. It was just this like really kid innocent optimism. I had a little baby brother that passed away, and he only made it to 2 weeks. So, but my mom gave birth to him, and he had Down syndrome, and he had a heart problem. And it was something my family had moved houses because our house wasn't big enough for 4 kids. And my dad was starting a business, and there's all these things happening at once, trying to like make room for this new life. And when he didn't make it, I think it very easily could have. I was 13 at the time, so I was old enough to like very much know what was going on. But my parents' marriage could have collapsed. And probably sent all of the kids into a bit of like a chaotic place.
Mm-hmm.
But my dad got up and he said in front of all of our community at the funeral, from this day on, we are not going to have fighting anymore in our family.
Wow.
Like, we are going to make changes to honor a short life lived.
Wow.
And I think about that. That's like watering a seed, you know?
Yeah.
And I, as a teenager, I mean, we experienced the peace of that direction as a response to something hugely painful. Like, we experienced the fruit of that in my family. And I've always remembered that kind of conscious decision in how to react to something really bad.
Yeah.
And even though bad things happen, you can't avoid them. I think making that choice to water that seed, even if it's like in the midst of extreme loss or pain or loss of health or loss of finances or whatever it is, easy to say,
right? Yeah,
really hard to do.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's my rabbit hole.
I love it. Well, and if you don't water the seeds, they'll die.
Oh yeah, literally, I don't plant gardens. My mom's a huge gardener, but 2 months ago I planted a garden, and I've been staring at these plant beds that someone else put in the back of my apartment. And Winston was gone for a month in South Africa, and I wasn't working, and I was real bored. And so I was like, I'm gonna plant some plants.
Nice.
So I spent the entire weekend going to Home Depot and lugging heavy bags of dirt over my shoulder one at a time. I think I made 5 or 6 trips to Home Depot because I couldn't fit all the dirt in my car, and then I was carrying it in by myself. And then I just picked up a bunch of random plants, zucchini and peppers and plants I don't even like, and tomatoes. And I was like, I'm going to plant these plants. And so I had to refill all the soil, make sure it was moist, make sure it was proper conditions. Didn't even know if I was planting them in the sun, in the shade. Yeah. And then got all these little babies planted. And then, kid you not, the next day was when that hurricane, tornado, earthquake, whatever, rolled through LA. And I'm looking at my tiny plants and I'm like, you've got to be kidding me. The one day that it rains in LA is going to be like right after I plant my garden. Yeah. So I protected them and they made it. And then I left for Ireland for a month for a job. And there was no one around to water the plants. And they had really been doing well. And I was seeing all these little fruits. And then I came home and they're so dead. And yesterday I literally was standing outside just with my hands in my hips, staring at these sad zucchinis that stopped growing like halfway through. And I was just thinking about how this is just a total definition of what you choose to water. Yeah. And like, I think as an artist, we all have things that we can water. We just don't think that they're good enough to water.
Ooh. Yeah. Well,
but we have them.
That's true. Yeah.
And we just don't pay attention to them a lot of the time because we don't think that they live up, or we think they're too small, or they're not visible yet, or they won't actually grow. We don't actually believe that if we water them, it'll make a difference. And I think that is fundamentally untrue.
Wow. That's beautiful. Ooh,
you started it. You started it with a quote. People like that, though, I realize, like people who you see physically, we'll just say gardeners, good gardeners, not like me, good gardeners, people with a real green thumb. They tend to take care of everything in their life intentionally. Like to be able to get up every morning and refill your water jug again and again and again, and, you know, pay attention to these tiny things that are just growing out of dirt in the ground. But I feel like everyone that I know who is that way, also that transfers over to their relationships and their marriages and their homes and even their careers, you know? So I feel like, hey, everyone go out and garden.
Water your seeds.
Yeah.
Well, thank you.
Yeah.
This has been so fun. We should do it again. I don't like when sometimes you listen to a podcast and they have a really good guest and then they say, we should do this again. And then they never do it again. So we should do it again.
We should. Yeah.
Yeah, this has been great.
Enough vulnerability for one day. We'll save the rest for another day.
Save the rest. Hey, thank you so much for listening. If you enjoy this conversation, please give us a follow, subscribe, and check out larkhouse.com to find out more about the different initiatives that we are developing to build community and to help artists like you realize their full potential. See you soon.